Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf Tzadi Gimel contains a number of halachic discussions which center around a circumstance where you have two chaseros, or two areas, could be karfifin or roofs, that are adjacent to each other, and one of them is larger than the other, such that the walls of one stick out further than the wall of the other in their shared seam. Now, the Gemara is in the middle of a discussion about that, and it's Abaye has said that it's not possible that adding a wall makes halachic problems. Adding a wall should always make the halacha simpler, because you are now dividing rishuyos up. It cannot be that it makes things worse. The Gemara is in the middle of bringing examples to argue with Abaye that say that you could have a situation where adding a wall creates halachic problems and makes the halachos worse. The Gemara is going to bring another 3 examples of that, and then the Gemara will return back to the concept of the adjoining chatzeros, the large and the small, and bring up a number of halachic discussions which are relevant to that and which you can possibly bring proofs from similar cases. So first of all, again, Abaye has said adding walls can never cause halachic problems, it can only solve them, and the Gemara has a few examples where that's not true. Abaye's general answer will be that either the wall is not creating the problem, or you're not really adding a wall here, you're actually removing a wall by adding a wall. But let's see what happens. The Gemara's first proof is from a sukkah. The sukkah that's being discussed here is where you have a frame. There are 4 corner pillars that are each a tefach wide. That's holding up the frame, which is holding up the schach. And now you also have 2 walls that are across from each other, parallel to each other. The other 2 walls are open, but you do have the beam, you do have the corner post, which takes up a tefach on the open walls. Therefore, what you really end up having is 2 full walls and at least 1 tefach. You have more than 1 tefach, but you have at least 1 tefach. So that's a kosher sukkah. However, if you would then build 2 more walls right next to the existing walls, such that the beams are now on the outside of your new walls, now you don't have a kosher sukkah anymore, because you have 2 walls and the beams are outside the sukkah. The beams are not inside the sukkah, so you don't have the additional tefach anywhere. So by adding those 2 walls, you've made halacha worse. Now it's not a sukkah. Now it's not a kosher sukkah anymore. So this question was asked to Abaye, and Abaye said, first of all, according to me, it is a kosher sukkah, because the horizontal beams that are holding up the schach have an edge, and you have the halacha of pitikra, which says that an edge of a roof comes down and forms a wall. So I do hold that you do have the 4 walls here. Even according to you, that don't hold of that, you hold that you don't have pitikra unless you already have 3 walls. So according to you, there's not a problem here, because by you adding 2 walls, you're not creating additional walls, you're getting rid of the tefach wide pieces that were there before. You've now blocked them out. Now they end up on the outside of the sukkah instead of on the inside of the sukkah. That's why you've made less walls, not more walls. That's why it becomes a problem. But adding walls actually can never be a halachic issue. Okay, the Gemara's next proof is if you have a house that has partial ceiling. Half the house is roofed and half the house is open to the air. So the halacha is you're allowed to plant grapes in one part and vegetable seeds in the other part. Is not kilayim. However, if you would extend the ceiling across the entire house, then it would be forbidden to plant like that. So you see, by adding a ceiling, I'm creating halachic issues, more things become usher. So Abaye says again, you're not creating a ceiling, you're not creating a wall, you're removing a wall. As long as you had half a ceiling where the ceiling ended, you had an edge. An edge is considered a pitikra. It goes down and forms a wall. You extend the ceiling all the way, you don't have an edge dividing up between the grapevines and the vegetable plants anymore, and that's why you have an issue. You haven't created a wall, you've removed a wall. Okay, the Gemara's next proof is from a brisa discussing hilchos kilayim. It's going to be a kasha, and then Abaye is going to say, well, why don't you ask me the same kasha from a brisa, and then he's going to, from a mishnah instead of from a brisa. It's always better to ask from a mishnah, and then he's going to answer both of them in one fell swoop. What's the kasha? The kasha is that if you want to plant vegetables near a grapevine, near a vineyard, like karam is at least a minimum number of grapevines. If you want to plant vegetables near there, so as long as there's no walls involved, you got to go 4 amos away. You need to have a 4 amma gap between the grapes and the vegetables, and that's because a border of 4 amma, a strip 4 amos wide surrounding a vineyard, counts as part of the vineyard. That's where you need to have that there in order to pass with the wagons and the devices which you use to work on the vineyard, and therefore a 4 amos strip surrounding the vineyard has the halacha of the vineyard itself. You want to plant, you got to plant further than that. Now, what if there's a wall? What if there's a wall built around the vineyard? So if the wall is less than 12 amos away, you can't plant anywhere. Even though there's space between the 4 amos strip and the wall, you can't plant in that space. The fact that the wall is there makes it forbidden to plant in that remaining just under 8 amos. So Gemara says, so you see here clearly, adding a wall makes it usher. So adding a wall makes halachic problems. So Abaye says, you could have brought me the same proof from a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah that discusses the concept of karachas hakerem and mechol hakerem. Mechol hakerem is the strip that goes all the way around. Karachas hakerem is where you have a space between two vineyards. What's the halacha there? So you need a 4 amos strip surrounding each of the vineyards, just like you need a 4 amos strip going around the vineyard. And you also have to have, if you want to plant vegetables in the space or past the edge of the vineyard, you have to have a minimum size vegetable patch. It can't be too small to be significant, then it's just considered to be part of the vineyard. It's got to be at least minimum size to be chashuv. What's the minimum size? That's a machlokes Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says it's got to be at least 4 amos wide. Beis Shammai says it has to be at least 8 amos wide. Either way, the halacha is that you have to have a large space between two parts of the vineyard. You're going to end up having to have, according to Beis Hillel, you have to have at least 16 amos. You need a 4 amos strip for each vineyard. Plus, you have to have 4 amos between two sets of 4 amos that you're going to plant as part of the vegetables, because you have to have 4 amos for each side. Otherwise, each side, if you don't have 4 amos for each side, then it becomes absorbed into the vineyard that's there. Now, if it's next to the wall, so you only have to have 12 amos there altogether, because you have to have 4 amos space from the vineyard, plus you have to have 4 amos wide that you're planting the vegetables in, and it's an actual thing. And you also have to be spaced 4 amos from the wall, so you have to have a total of 12 amos. It's the same halacha which we saw before in the Brisa. You have to have 12 amos if you're spacing from the vineyard to a wall, but if you're spacing from a vineyard to empty without a wall, you only have to go 4 amos. It's the same kasha. So Abaye says, so why don't you ask me from here? But the answer is the same in both of them. The answer is that you can't plant close to a wall. You can't plant vegetables close to a wall because it's weakens the wall. When you plow the ground, the soil becomes loose and the wall is going to collapse. That's why you can't plant in those 4 amos. So what ends up happening is that you're taking away 4 amos, so you can't plant close to the wall. And we do have the halacha, you need a minimum space of 4 amos wide for your vegetables, otherwise it's not considered chashuv enough and becomes bottled to the vineyard. So that's why you need 12 amos between the vineyard and the wall. 4 amos, that's part of the vineyard. 4 amos for the minimum size of your vegetables, and then 4 amos you have to distance yourself from the wall, otherwise you weaken the wall. If there's no wall, so you don't have a problem, you don't have to weaken the wall, you don't have any issues, you plant whatever you want, you can go as far as you want. But this is not a halachic problem, it's a practical problem. Okay, now we turn to the discussion of the large chutzner adjoining the small chutzner, and we're going to have a number of interesting halachic discussions about them. So again, a large chutzner and a small chutzner is not so much about size, it means that they adjoin each other, they share one wall. The small chutzner doesn't fill up the entire wall. The large chutzner extends the shared wall past the borders of the small chutzner, so that if you're standing in the large chutzner and you're looking towards the small chutzner, you see pieces of wall there. There is a little bit of wall on the left, a little bit of wall on the right, and in the center it's open to the small chutzner. If, however, you're standing in the small chutzner, you do not see any pieces of wall. Your entire side that adjoins the large chutzner is open. Now, as we had seen before, the halacha was that the small chutzner is considered to be bottled to the large chutzner, so that somebody who is in the large chutzner is also considered to be resident in the small chutzner. So he's in his large chutzner, he's also in the small chutzner. It doesn't work the other way. Somebody in the small chutzner is not considered to be present in the large chutzner. The Gemara now is an interesting shayla. What if you have 3 chutzneros lined up? The Gemara is not going to talk about chutzneros. The Gemara is going to talk about karfifos. And the halachic issue we'll discuss is as follows. We had seen that if you make weak walls, that means walls that are only vertical sticks or walls that are only horizontal ropes, and you're using them to enclose a large karfif, we're not going to talk about chatzeros, so we're going to talk about karfifin. You use them to enclose a large area, so the halacha is as follows. If you have at least 3 people resident in this area, so then that weak wall, which is made of just vertical or just horizontal lines, that weak wall is good enough to enclose any size. If, however, you have only 1 person, then it's only good up to 5,000 square amos, not more. This is talking about whether they're planning on living there. Alright, so what we need is as follows. Therefore, to sum up, what we need is as follows. We have to have a situation in which we have at least 3 people living in one zone. in order that this weak wall should qualify them for a large area, for a fully large area. Otherwise, they are limited to a much smaller area. Now, the Gemara's question is discussing, you have 3 karfifos set up like this, large and small. It's not 2 karfifos, it's 3. So the first case we discussed, you have 3 karfifos in a row. The middle one is small, and the 2 large ones are on the sides. That means that if you're standing in the large one, you're looking towards the middle one, you're also considered to be in the middle one. If you're in the middle one, you're not considered to be in the outer one. So this, the Gemara says, is pashut, that the middle one has 3 people. Oh, so we should add one more thing. Each karfif has 1 person living in it. So now, the middle one, the Gemara says, halachically, has 3 people living in it. It has the guy who lives there. And each of the 2 large ones are considered to be present in the small one. And they both adjoin the small one. So the small one really has 3 people present in it. That being the case, even this weak type of wall is good enough to count to enclose a very large area, and they all have access to a large area. Now the case is, what if it's the opposite? What if the middle chutzner is large, and the 2 outer chutzneros are small? Now what happens is that the guy in the large central chutzner is considered to be resident in the outer chatzeiros. So, that guy, where is he resident? Doesn't really matter. If he's resident in one chatzar or the other chatzar, you don't have any one place that has 3 people in it. One of them has 2, or maybe both of them have 2, but that's as high as you get. You don't have 3 in one, and therefore they're all limited to a minimum size of less than 5,000 square amas with this weak wall. Now the question the Gemara says becomes, what if you have a setup like this? We have the large chatzar in the middle, but there are 2 people in the middle chutzner. Now remember, whoever's in the middle chutzner is considered to be present in the small chutzner. The middle one is the large one. So could we say that those 2 people are considered to be present in both chutzneros? Therefore, if you look at the one all the way on the right, or look at the one all the way on the left, the truth is you only need one of them. So both people are considered to be present in that chutzner. Choose any one you want, and therefore that chutzner now has 3 people in it, the one who's in it, and the 2 people who are in the large middle one that are considered to be in that one as well. So now I have 3 people in one, shouldn't call it chutzner, one karfef, and therefore you have 3 people in one zone. It's enough to be able to use this weak wall even for a large area. Do we say that, or do we say no, we split it? There's 2 people in the middle large karfef, so one is considered to be present in the small one on the left, and then one is considered to be present in the small one on the right, but you don't have 3 people in any one spot. So now the Gemara says, even if you want to say that, what happens if you have 1 person in the middle and 2 people on each of the small side ones? Now this 1 person has to go to one of those 2 places. Do we say that he goes to one of those places, he's considered present in one of those, and therefore that one that he's present in has 3 people present in it, and therefore the walls are good even for a large area? Or do we say, listen, he's equally pulled to both side karfifin, and therefore he's not in either of them, he can only be in one at a time, and since he's equally pulled to both, he's not in any, and none of them therefore have 3, and you end up with the entire thing being usher? What do you say? So Gemara says, all these shilas dalachas, there's the kula, we go leniently. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to a different discussion, which will circle back around to these adjoining large and small chatzeros. This discussion is what happens when you have a wall between 2 chatzeros, but the wall is not made up of fully wall. The wall is made up partially of 5 tachim high of wall, and then 5 tachim is the difference in the land height between the 2 chatzeros. So one chatzer is 5 tachim higher than the other, and then it's got another 5 tachim built on top of the edge, so that you end up with a 10 tefach wall there. So Chizda says it doesn't count as a wall. You have to have either the wall is 10 tvachim high, or the land difference is 10 tvachim high, but you can't combine the 2. So Gemara says, well, that's not true. I have a brisa that says explicitly the other way. The brisa says that you can combine 5 tvachim of wall height and 5 tvachim of land height, and it even says that the halacha is that if you have a case like that, so it counts as if they're separate, and the 2 chatzeros are not allowed to make an erev chatzeros between them. They can't make one joint erev chatzeros, as we've seen in the halacha. If there's no access between 2 chatzeros, you can't make an erev chatzeros. They have to make separate erev chatzeros. They are allowed to make their own. Case like that, where they're completely separated, they're each allowed to make their own erev chatzeros. Now the brisa continues and says that if the wall is less than 5 tachim, so you have less than a total of 10 tefach height, so there the halacha is that they are allowed to make one joint erev chatzeros because there is no separation between them, and they're not allowed to make separate eruvin because there is again no separation between them. We had seen the halacha before. When you have a wall between chatzeros, they have to have separate Eruvei chatzeros. When there's no wall, they have to join in one Eruv chatzeros. They can't make separate ones. When there is a doorway, then they have the option of either making a joint one or a separate one. So anyway, the Gemara is a kasha here. It says clearly that if you have that 5 tachim of wall joined with 5 tachim of land height. So the Gemara says not a problem. The reason is because the guy on the bottom sees 10 tachim of wall, 10 tachim of land, 5 tachim of land, and 5 tachim of wall. So he sees a 10 tafach wall. So he can't join an Eruv with the upper guy. But the upper guy only sees a 5 tafach wall. And that's why it doesn't count for him. So the Gemara says, okay, if that's the case, so then I understand why the lower chatzar is allowed to make its own independent Eruv chatzeros between all the people that live in that chatzar, because he's totally blocked off from the upper chatzar, but the upper chatzar is not blocked off from the lower chatzar, so he should be obligated to join with the lower chatzar, and he can't, because the lower chatzar can't join with him. Therefore, he should be restricted from making any Eruv Chatzeros at all. How could he make his own Eruv Chatzeros? How come the people in the upper Chatzar are allowed to join in their own Eruv Chatzeros if they don't have a wall, according to what you're saying? So Gemara says, okay, so the situation must be that the space of 5 tefach wall is a doorway, meaning there is 10 tefach wall going most of the way around and closing most of the area between these two Chatzeros. There's just a doorway. There's a less than 10 amma wide strip where the wall is only 5 tachim high. A doorway, we said the situation is everybody has an option. So the people on the bottom, they don't have any option. Even when the wall is only 5 tachim high, it's for them 10 tachim high because you have to add the height of the land. So they can't join with the upper. But the people on the upper have the choice of joining with the lower or not joining with the lower because they have a doorway between them. And therefore they can choose to make their own separate Eruv Chatzeros. Okay, the Gemara says they understand that, but then how do you understand the rest of the brisa? The rest of the brisa says that if that 5 tefach wall ain't 5 tachim, it's less than 5 tachim, so then the halacha is they have to join in one joint Eruv. They're not allowed to make separate Eruvin. But why? If it's just a doorway, so then we said they have an option. Right? They have a full 10 tefach wall the rest of the way around. They should have equal options. They should be allowed to join or to not join. So Gemara answers, the case is where it's only a doorway for the upper chatzar, but it's a complete side for the lower chatzar, meaning the lower chatzar is smaller than the upper chatzar. Here's we get back to our case. The lower chatzar is smaller than the upper chatzar, and for him the whole wall is down. The whole wall is less than 5 tefachim. For the upper guys, there's just a doorway over there. So that's why it works out. For the lower guys, they have less than a 10 tefach wall. The 5 tefach section is not 5 tefach here, it's 4 tefachim, and therefore they don't have a complete wall. So that's why they can't join. They are not allowed to form their own separate area. They don't have that option. For them, the whole side is fully open. The whole side being fully open is not a doorway. If it's not a doorway, it's fully open, then they can't opt to have their own Eruv. So the Gemara says very nice. So they can't opt, but let the people in the upper chatzar opt. For them, it's just a doorway. So how come we say that everybody has to join in one Eruv chatzar? They should have the right to opt out. So the Gemara says yes, that's what it means. It means that the people in the lower chatzar do not have the right to force the upper chatzar to join. They themselves have only the choice of a joint Eruv. They cannot make their own Eruv. People in the other chatzar, however, do have a doorway, so for them they have an option, and that's not what the brisa was referring to. Okay, now what's actually the halacha about this wall that's made partially of 5 tachim of wall and 5 tachim of land height? So Meremar said they do join to form one wall. Ravina found Rav Achabri de Rava. He asked him, what did Meremar say about it? He said he didn't say anything, and the Gemara concludes the halacha is that they do join. Okay, now the Gemara has another shaila, which will again discuss a large and small chatzar. Rav Haishi said, what happens if people move into a chatzar on Shabbos? Now, people moving to a chatzar on Shabbos doesn't necessarily mean that they moved in. It could just be that a wall that separated their chatzar fell down, and now their chatzar is joined and open to the chatzar, to another chatzar. The question is there a problem now? Because they might not be allowed to carry in their chatzar, because now they need to have an Eruv Chatzeros with the chatzar that they're now open to, and they don't. So do we say that, or do we say, listen, since they were allowed to carry in their own chatzar at the beginning of Shabbos, the heter stays for the remaining part of Shabbos? So Gemara said, so Rav Chisda said, I'll bring you a proof. We have the case of a chatzar, a large chatzar, which is nifratz, which is open to a small chatzar, and the halacha over there is that the large chatzar is mutter because it just has a doorway to the small chatzar is atzar because it has an entire wall that fell down. Gemara understands when it says nifratza, it means that the wall fell down on Shabbos. So even though it fell down on Shabbos, we still see that the halacha changes. So Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean it fell down on Shabbos, it means it fell down before Shabbos. And it was Rabba who said it, but he said maybe that's what it means. Abai said, what do you mean maybe? Don't say maybe. Say that's for sure what it means, because you hold that halachas don't change in Shabbos. It's fixed from the beginning of Shabbos. Like you have in the case where Rav Huna asked, what if people made an Eruv between two chatzeros or lying on a doorway between them, or a window between them, and then the doorway got blocked on Shabbos. So now they no longer have an Eruv. The question is, are they allowed to use the wall? They allowed to use the holes in the wall. And you said that the halacha is that once it was mutter in the beginning of Shabbos to use the wall, it's mutter for the rest of Shabbos. So there shouldn't be any suffix here, that it's clear that however it was defined in the beginning of Shabbos maintains that halacha for the rest.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.